Family Resource Center on Disabilities is the Region 1 Parent Training and Information Center of Illinois. You can reach us at 312-939-3513 or email us at info@frcd.org. We encourage you to visit our website at www.frcd.org or follow us on Twitter at FRCDPTI. We encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube page at FRCD 1231 and like us on Facebook. Family Resource Center on Disabilities is not a law firm or a legal service agency. Thank you for joining Family Resource Center on Disabilities Lunch and Learn webinar, Dissecting the IEP Part 5, Transition. This presentation will be presented by FRCD Bilingual Parent Trainer Zabita Pasha. This webinar is being recorded. If at any point you have questions, you can raise your hand in the attendees box, or you can type your question in the questions box located on your control panel. There will be a handout given with today's PowerPoint and additional resources at a later time. Okay, Zabita, you can begin.
Thank you so much, Paula. Welcome, everybody, to our webinar today pertaining to transition. This presentation is part 5 of our curriculum, Dissecting the IEP. And in today's presentation, we will make sure that you understand what is needed and what does it mean transition in your child's IEP. Paula?
Yes, Zabita.
Yes. Can you transfer, because I am unable to move the PowerPoint.
Okay, one moment. We're experiencing a technical difficulty. Bear with us for one moment.
Thank you.
Zabita, while we wait, could you tell everyone about who we are and what we do?
Yeah, while we are waiting on this, Family Resource Center on Disabilities is a parent training information center. It's one of the pioneers of parent center. Every state should have one, and the mission is to assist, empower, educate, inform the parents on their rights, to make sure you understand, what are your rights in the special education process. Also, we have a big piece that we provide the parents with information and referrals. We help parents to be networked to the right entities, if they are seeking a specific information. We provide services to 8 counties in Illinois. We also provide services to 2/3 of Illinois families who have children with IEPs and 504. There is another parent training information center in the southern part of Illinois, which is Family Matters. Like I said, every state should have one, and we have been among the parent centers pioneers in the 70s to start, this mission of empowerment and support to the parents to make sure that they understand, you understand your rights. Also, I will say a few things about today's presentation, and we will kind of cover what does it mean, the definition of transition, how should you, look for the information in your child's IEP, what is the transfer of rights when your child becomes an adult at the age of 18, learn about things that you need to do. Among those things are delegation of rights when, your child becomes an adult. So they have to delegate their rights to you to make the informed decision about their education. Find out what happened if the student received a regular diploma or a certificate of completion. Learn about the student participation in the graduation ceremony while maintaining the right to attend the special education uh, courses or services. Be informed on the student participation in the home base and what are the adult services. And that is a huge piece, and many families, they kind of get faced with those questions, and they have to learn how to navigate that process. You got it, Paula?
I do.
Okay, so we're moving on to the first slide of the presentation.
Okay, bear with me.
Thank you. So once the student with disability leave the high school, then a lot of questions arise. Then where my child is going, where my child is living, and all of those things. In the meantime, the right to receive free appropriate public education, it is not available to the student. So families like myself, I have a child who is 16, face, these questions, and literally the entitlement to receive special education and cease. We have in the past covered the transition that, and even in special education services, that the students are eligible and entitled to receive special education in Illinois until one day before they turn 22. So parents have the right to keep their children if it is appropriate and also helpful to them to stay receiving special education after the high school. There are programs, they call them, those transition programs. Leaving the high school is the beginning of the adult life, and for families and the students, or the young adult with disability, the choice and the decision about the future may be more complex than the average family who does not have that disability in their life. So state regulation require here in Illinois that the transition planning started at 14 and a half federally, and when I say federally, IDEA, which is the Individual Disability Education Act, cover that transition at 16, and that's the national norm. But each state have their own regulation. Here in Illinois, 14 and a half is the age that is appropriate to have a transition plan in the IEP. At that age, the transition is an official part of your child's IEP. So the student and us families are expected to take an active part. And what does that mean? We have to participate meaningfully with a lot of information and data to make that transition plan very appropriate, beneficial, and helpful, and also outcome-oriented. We have to achieve something with that transition plan based on the need, the preference, the interest. There are many components, and I'm going ahead on myself now to give a lot of information about that. It is critical that the family and the student understand that the student entrance into the adulthood and exit from high school means that the right of entitlement cease and ends. Where one school provides a centralized source of education, guidance, and transportation, and many, an array of services, and even recreation in some instance, they would need to organize their own life. So that means that us families and the students have to organize or revamp everything around, getting everything on our own. So we have to learn how to navigate this array of adult services and providers based, on our state resources and what is available, and also based on what the federal laws and basically there is one law that is federally covering, the adults once they exit, the high school, which is the ADA, the American Disability Act, and I will cover that, at a later slide. So we families provide a critical support system to our children, especially during the transition. So our active participation and partnership with the IEP team is critical, and that will help to bridge all the gaps going to the adulthood and seeking adult services in that system. Next slide, Paula. Thank you. So in order to bridge the gap between the school and the adult services, the school is required to develop a transition plan for each student who have an IEP and have a disability that is adversely impacting their learning. So what is transition? Transition planning is a great opportunity for us families and for the student to take a leadership role in setting goals. And those goals, they have to be geared towards, outcomes. What are we going to accomplish with these goals? What will be, the thing that the student will accomplish with this. So at 14 and a half in Illinois, we continue they continue the services up to 1 day before they turn 22. The transition planning prepare the student for life after school through those goals, help the student plan and choose the course of study while they are in high school. That help also the student decide what skills they need to develop to live and work in their communities, hopefully independently. That transition planning will give the student the opportunity to explore work and career options while they are still in high school. That transition plan will help the student and the family to make connection and networking with other training programs, colleges, agencies, all of what is going to involve the adult services. And I will cover that again at a later slide. The transition will help the student and the entire IEP team to learn about the interests, the student interests, what works and does not work in their lifestyle, their skills and talent and preference, and who can help in achieving these specific goals in the transition. Next slide. So, like I said earlier, IDEA, which is the Special Education Law or Act, is to ensure that all students with disabilities have available to them free appropriate public education, which is FAPE, that emphasize special education and related services designed to meet the unique need of each student who has a disability that is adversely impacting their learning, including the transition. And in the transition, if you see, we had highlighted the employment and independent living. So in Illinois here, we start at 14 and a half, the conversation about transition. The transition is the IEP itself at 14 and a half, and when we have a child in high school, it is the main component of the IEP. The transition should have measurable post-secondary goals, what we call SMART goals. So those goals have to be specific, measurable, attainable, and that's so important because we have to consider the child's preference, interest, talent, skills, all of the above to make those goals SMART. Realistic, we have to be also conscious of the student's preference. We cannot just say, okay, you want to be a doctor, so what are the skills that you have to be a doctor? Do you know anything about the medical field? Did you volunteer? What is, we all know the student, they flip-flop with, with the career that they choose. But in drafting those goals, we have to be specific, realistic, and also timeline. We have to set those goals, with a time frame. And again, we have to make sure that we are talking about SMART goals, outcome-oriented specifically for the transition. So the transition, it's a set or a group of activities for a student that fits like a puzzle. Next slide, Paula. So these are the main areas of transition, and this is the full picture. So in the transition, we should cover employment, community living or independent living skills, recreation and leisure that is pertaining to social, emotional, and social life. Post-secondary education and training. Post-secondary education can be, for certain students who are, college bound, and they will have, that opportunity to go to college. But what do we do to prepare them to be successful in college? and for the recreation and leisures and all of those social, emotional, what skills do we have to help the student acquire or learn to be a successful human being in the society and also a successful citizen paying taxes. In the community living, which is the independent living skills, is our student, with this transition plan, will be able to understand rent, lease, mortgage, finances, balancing a check, all of those skills to balance, those skills to pay the bills. Some of you may, be familiar with that. Are we able to teach all of these things, these skills to the student prior to exiting the high school? As far as employment, it is a process. I will highly recommend that the family start by volunteering. If you have a kiddo, in junior high, start by exploring opportunities in your own community, like church, libraries, anything in your community that is available. Take advantage of it and expose, your child to many things so you can see what is their interest, even though they may talking about music. Are they good, in recording, in detail? Because the music industry has so many layers. The sports industry has so many layers. Every field has many layers. So you have to expose your child or your student to those, things in your community if that's possible and if it is appropriate. All of these areas should be covered by measurable post-secondary goals that should be written in the IEP. And again, we have to take in consideration the skills, the interest, the preference, and the present level. And I think the present level was one of the things that we covered in this series of the IEP. So like I said, the transition is a set or group of activities that fit like a puzzle. The full picture of the puzzle is the student's life after high school. What does that mean? It's the outcome-oriented that I was mentioning. The transition plan should be designed to help each student to access a variety of transition services, activities, and support that will help them to move from high school or from school to adult activity, including post-secondary, vocational, employment, adult education, adult services, and independent living. So when we talk about all of these things, we have to also make sure that at home we're having this conversation. Do you know how we pay to live in this house? And most of the time, my child specifically, she says, no, we live in the house. She doesn't have no concept of what it takes to maintain and have a house. So we breaking it down like mortgage. And she's just like frowning and said, what does it mean, mortgage? Is something that we need to pay so we can stay. It is a process, and we're breaking it down. And I will give example of my child because she's almost 16, and I am into this in the transition. So the transition services are intended to prepare your student or your child to move from the world of school to the real world. And we all know the real world, there is no accommodation and modification in everywhere. Here is my kind of joking statement. There is no special Walmart. There is no special Walgreens. When we go to Walmart or Walgreens, we are all the same. So does that student who have a disability have all the skills to go to Walmart, shop, do the list, do the finances and all of that? First of all, is he or she safe? Do they understand all of those social safety cues while they are at Walmart? In other words, when we talk about transition, it's really the intention to prepare our youth to be functional in the society or the real world, and give them as best as possible all the tools to be independent or close to independence. So the IEP team consider areas such as post-secondary education or training, and this is a specific areas for those who are going to college or to a specific training or a trade school. So what are the things that we need to give them? Most of the times we have to keep and emphasize those instructional goals, such as English language arts, math. They need to read and do math, simple as that. For any application to college, they need to read at least 10th, 11th grade level and do the math. And all the ACTs and STs, they have to have, a higher school. The transition service themselves are a set of activities that are based on the student's strength, preference, interests, and needs. The piece of the transition service puzzle may include, depending on the child's needs, other things, and among those other things are the instruction. And when we say instruction, is to support a student who have a specific need in areas such as language art or reading or comprehension. My child have a need in comprehension. She read at a higher level and she can decode and has a good fluency, but her comprehension is so low. So we need to bridge that gap. And when we say the comprehension, we have to also consider exposing her to functional reading material, for example, the newspaper. And we started as, as simple as reading the page for the sports or something that is funny to, to motivate her to read. And we are increasing it up to, events and highlights and what have you. It is in the works, and it is very difficult. But again, you can use those strategies of the IEP and consult with your IEP team, and they need to give you guidance and help you with, this specific question. Better yet, the SMART goals in your child's IEP or the transition component of your child IEP should have goals pertaining to instruction. If there is a skill deficit in reading, math, whatever the case may be. They need to successfully access the general education curriculum like all students in high school, and placing them in an advanced classes, gain skills that he or she needs, like specifically I'm highlighting the social skills and the training for social skills. That will really be a key component, and advocating for themselves, be determined, and we can start as early, as elementary for them, to be self-advocate and define what do we need, what I'm looking for. I all the time support the parents, to help their children. Just raise your hand, I need help. Teacher, I didn't understand this question. What does it mean? Teacher, I need, a pencil. I need to sharpen my pencil. And all of those little small steps will really, really help your high schooler to be successful and have good outcomes. We also could include the development of accommodations, curriculum adaptation, peer modeling, peer tutoring. Pair your child or your student with non-disabled peer. That is a big, huge piece because they will have that role model. And when they work, let's say you have a project at the high school level, make sure that in your child IEP somewhere that you need your child to have a peer, modeling in those areas, so they will know how to function with other people who are not disabled. As far as the community experience, these are provided in the community setting. In Chicago Public School, where my daughter is enrolled, they have the CBI, which is the community-based instruction. What does it mean? They take the kids out and they give them the opportunity to interact, in restaurants, libraries, post office. But it has to be functional. We are doing a visit to the post office, have some mail, some form of mail. So what we do with the mail is we have to put postage. We have to weigh the mail. We have to stay in line, and that's social piece that is so important. Can they stay in line? Do they know how much it's going to cost for that postage? When the mail will arrive? These questions, they need to learn how to ask these things. For the community experience, they may require job shadowing or somebody, to help them, and basically those are the high school teachers and staff. Like I said, as best as possible, if you have community opportunities, help your child to volunteer at a church. If no more, just to put, little toys for the kids or whatever the case may be. Help in your local community. Do they know banking? Do they have any ideas what they're required to open an account? What do I need? The ID, all of those things. Transportation. Do they know how to navigate the transportation? What is the schedule for the buses or the trains? What is the fare for the bus? What is the fare for the train? We all know here in Illinois we have two systems. We have the city system, which is the CTA, and we have the PACE outside of the city. So the fares are different. The schedules are different. Does our child or my child know the schedule? For sure she does not. So we have to use tools and ways and means for her to access that information. Basically, it's the technology, so that kind of make it a little bit easier. In the transition, there is related services. As long as the student is in the school system, they still are entitled to receive related services if they have an IEP, and that's the definition of special education. And among those special related services is social services, social work, medical, rehab, transportation, speech, physical, nursing, all of those things, they still remain if they are going to be appropriate to meet the needs of that student. I emphasize the social work because that is a big piece in our students who have a disability, and we need to prepare them to understand the social cues and learn safety and all of that is pertaining, to be functional out in the real world. Development of employment and other post-secondary adult living objectives. This is also a very important piece, and this includes services that lead to a job. So we have these students or this population that they will learn a skill to land a job or a career. So they need to learn how to do career planning, guidance, person-centered planning, job placement, job tryouts, volunteering, all of these things they need, they need to learn. So here in this slide, the transition plan helps the student and the staff at school and the parents, of course, to clarify the course of choice, the interests, the needs, career options and experiences, skill development, connection, and networking with the adult services. And adult services, basically, they have the adult education, the adult agencies like FSI and DRS, the Department of Rehab Services. So the services the school may include in the transition plan are instruction, community experience, related services, and employment, daily living skills. Oh my goodness, this is a big one. The daily living skills are the need, they need as a foundation for everyday life, self-care, independent living, money management, maintaining a home, like a lease, for example. When we talked about the mortgage for my daughter, a lease, renting, what are the requirements of those things? What does it mean, a good credit or bad credit? Health care, maintaining their doctor appointment, if they can, manage their medication if they are on medication. The ins and outs of the health care, because it is complex even for us, adults. It's so complex. Do they understand what they're required to have health care? And if I get sick, what do I do? If there is an emergency at home, what do I do? So all of these things are really, really important and to build that puzzle and complete that picture of the puzzle. Next slide, Paula, please, and thank you. So the transition in the IEP, the team identified the present level, and this I really highly recommend that you go back and listen to our webinar about the present level. I would just kind of briefly define it. The present level is the baseline of the student, where they are. Let's say my daughter, she is a sophomore. Her present level at the sophomore level for reading, it is for the reading decoding, she is at the 10th grade level, but the comprehension, she is at the 5th. So that's a present level. So we have to identify where our children, what is their baseline, what do they know now, so we can build and scaffold from that point and going forward. We have to identify the strengths, the needs, the interests. There are kids who are so strong in reading, and we have to use the strengths to build the gap, to bridge the gap. Those strengths can also be the learning style, how the students learn. Do they learn through, visual mode, or are they hands-on? Are they auditorial? The needs. There are many students who have layers and layers of needs, but we have to highlight and prioritize those needs based on the conversation in the transition. Are they interested in those things that we are going to talk about? The student has to be part of the conversation. Transition, in other words, is a personal central planning. We have to involve the student. We have to make sure their preference. We cannot force a student to go to college if they are not interested and it is not their preference. The IEP transition goals has to be measurable. What does that mean? We have to look if the student is making progress towards those goals. They have to be smart, like I said earlier, specific. If the kid is interested in the food industry, we have to be specifically looking into the reading component, math component, and also the functional skill of that particular area. Is the student able to manage, reading that recipe, making a budget for that recipe, making also, the money management. There is also the measurement, so they need to know and understand. Uh, they need to understand math. And the transition in the IEP is the transition services, the annual goals, the course of study. It's so important to highlight the course of study. We all know here in Illinois there are required classes and there are other classes that are elective. So in other words, if you see your kid is lacking, for instance, comprehension like mine, we substituted the Spanish, which is an elective. This is our second year substituting the Spanish for her to intensify the, the support in comprehension. So make sure in your course of study or the selection of the courses over the 4 years, make sure it will meet your child's unique needs. Better yet, I just learned last Tuesday in a wonderful presentation that we can have a conversation over 6 years if you have the intention to have your child or your student after 18 years. Also, the transition involves other activities, and the other activities is basically the recreational. Unfortunately, there is not a many recreational conversations during the IEP and during the transition, but you have to ask those simple questions. What do you have after school, in the high school setting? What do you have? Do you have, debate clubs? Do you have book clubs? Do you have any social skill? Do you have sports? Do you have music? Do you have anything that is going on after school? I just learned, last month or so that our daughter's high school is building now. They are building capacity to have, because she is in an agricultural high school and this is spring, they're building capacity to have a gardening club. So I said, okay, who is involved, what is going to involve, what time, and it is something that we are considering, but here's the deal, she's not interested. So we are talking to her about, just to be around friends. And she's still like, I don't like dirt, I don't like to do these things. So you have to consider, all the time having a conversation with your child. I understand some of the parents may frown and say, oh, my child is not verbal, but you have to kind of present it to them based on how they learn, how they get and process information. Next slide, Paula, please, and thank you. So the goals and the objectives, and I have kind of a couple of objectives here and goals. Post-secondary goal, after high school, I will attend a community college full-time in biology. So this is outcome-oriented, like I said, and how do we get there? How do we make sure that this student who have this outcome in their head to attend the college full-time in biology? So we need for them to read, like I said, do math, and be really strong in science. We also make sure that that social piece is there, and specifically the self-advocacy piece, because when they go to college, they are not covered under IDEA. They will only have access to accommodations. There are no modified curriculum. There is no modification at the community or at any level of college. They can only have accommodations. So are they able to say, I am a person with a disability and I need extended time? So we need to help them understand and learn that skill of self-advocacy. Self-determination, I have a very simple foundational goal that I set for our child is for her to learn how to read her IEP. Did I meet this goal? First of all, does she understand goal? What does it mean to her? Now we are breaking it down to her very small and very, very, simplified. So to understand the bigger picture, if you go into college, you have to do your work. You have to do more than what the teacher is telling you to do. So you have to do research, this, and that. So it involves a lot of layers, and it is intense, but again, it is outcome oriented. Transition service, improving reading skills, giving access to community college information. What college am I going to? Do they have a disability office? They have to demonstrate the knowledge of the admission requirement at least by 80% of their senior year. When they do that ACT and the SAT testing, they have to demonstrate that they have, all the skills and the knowledge for them to get to college. Reading is that's a foundational skill that we have to put in every goal, basically, because if they are going to college, they need to read. If there is a need in that area, we need to continue the conversation about the reading, the comprehension, the writing skills, all of what is involving, that component. If the kid is geared towards vocational or job, we still need the kid to read. For the job, they will have application. So they need to read those applications and fill them. So they have to have a level of reading that is appropriate and adequate. They need to also understand if they have those job applications, there are components that will ask them, their experience, what wages do they want to start with, or the negotiation for, their salaries or their wages and what have you. So they have to understand all of that. And we have to start by building vocabulary based on where the student is heading. If they are post-secondary education, outcome-oriented population, then we need to make sure that they understand what is college, what does it mean, access, accommodation, what law will cover me when I am out of the high school, who I'll go to if I have a problem at the college. Am I going to be in a dorm area or am I renting? If I am renting, I need to understand what is involved. If I am in a dorm, I have to make sure that is built into my tuition. So there are many things that can be involved in the conversation, and I can talk about it all day. Next slide, Paula, please, and thank you. So the goals and objective example for upon graduation, this student will attend a training, an adult training program part-time in the food industry. So does this student have all the skill and the abilities to understand the kitchen equipment? Is it safe for him or her to handle a knife, for example? Do they know what is safety with kitchen equipment? Like I said earlier, in this presentation, are they able to read the recipe? Are they able to do measurement? Are they able to do budget? So this outcome will involve instruction, meaning that they need to learn how to read. And there is also a functional goal with this, meaning that do they know the safety component of the kitchen equipment and handling it effectively. So the course of study will show work experience at the community, which is the community experience. For example, they have to take this kid basically to restaurants and expose them to kitchens in restaurants so they can know and have a model and an idea. Okay, I want to be a chef, so this is what it's going to look like. And I need to understand how I'm going to manage all of what come with being a chef. First of all, they have to be patient, communicative, understanding the timeline. When people are at a restaurant and you have, sometimes restaurants can get packed. So do they understand the pressure of time? Will they be able to fix that meal immediately? Do they have any idea of how to gather all the ingredients if they are not available? Can they substitute? So it involves a lot of layers again, and I can talk about it all day. So the course of study for this particular case can be, the CBR, which is the community-based instruction, exposing them, to that particular food industry. I would not discount the instruction on any level or for any post-secondary outcome. Uh, for employment, they need to read and do math. For post-secondary education, they need to read and do math. For independent living skills, they need to read, and the independent living skills can involve medication. They need to learn how to read their medication. What time am I taking it? And reading, the schedule for their doctors. They need to also, understand if there is co-payments involved. Can they handle the math and money management? So it's involving a lot of layers. Next slide, Paula. Thank you. So for us to accomplish that outcome, or the transition, it is an outcome-oriented process, we have to think about assessment. And the assessment will give us, again, the baseline or the present level. This is an array of assessment. Some of them will apply to your child and students, some of them may not. Mainly in the assessment, we have to have information that is accurate, adequate, and appropriate. The reason being, that assessment will give us information to scaffold and go to the next level. For example, the career cruising. It is a good tool, but it does not have every little bitty thing that our children, may be interested in. I've learned lately that the career cruising was one of the misleading, information that, misled the parents to where their child will be, in the forensic. And the child's reading skills have been very low. So that was kind of a little bit confusing and a gray area. So when you talk to your IEP team, be specific on the outcome of what the child want to be, where they will be, so they can pick and choose the appropriate tool for your child. The interest inventory is all the time a good tool because the interest, it varies by the age, by the circumstance, the environment. We all know our youth, they go, through stages. When they are young, life is peachy and pink, and they want to be, a doctor, and all of a sudden they said, oh my God, I went to the hospital, I don't like to see blood. I don't like a lot of noise with the ambulances and the equipment in the hospital. So their interests may change. So that inventory will give you really, really a good idea how your child is developing those skills toward those interests. Is that interest, first of all, stable, consistent? If it is consistent, it's a great deal. So you can work around that and make sure that you have other tools to help your child, be efficient or be prepared for that particular, area that they work in, or they want to be a doctor, or however, that conversation will go. So the assessment is one of the tools that I really, really emphasize to be proactive, understand the ins and outs of the assessment, because that gives you a lot of information about where your child, and a scaffolding process will start with this information. Some of the students will be able to take the ACT, some of them may not, including mine. The reason be because the skills are really not there for her to take the ACT, at least at this stage. We are not discounting it, but the ACT, it has a timeline. By junior year, they give them the ACT, and then senior year, they take another portion. So we are seeing it happening, but not on the time of junior and at the 18-year mark. There are many other tools, but I will highlight the Division on Career Development and Transition, the CDT, and the Council for Exceptional Children. They have great information. You will find this information in the links that will be sent with the presentation. Also, you can visit the National Secondary Transition Technical Assistance Center. It has another name now, and it is through the Office of Special Education Program. You have to become familiar with the different type of transition assessment and their characteristics. Select the method that assists your child by helping them answer the following questions, simple as, who are you? What is your disability? What do you want to do in life now and in the future? And what are some of the things that stresses you out? What are your stressors? And we don't have to use this big terminology, but do you feel anxious when we talk about work? Do you feel anxious when we talk about college? And I have conversation with families that I am supporting, just to kind of have like an inventory. And you can do it by the WH question and specifically the what. What do you want to do? Who are you? What is your disability? What are your opinion about this and about that? And select and have a conversation and have approaches that are appropriate for the student based on their cognitive, their skills. Do not forget the cultural sensitivities. Because we have those things, sometimes they are put in the back burner. We have families from different backgrounds, and we have to consider that responsiveness, that cultural responsiveness in the conversation. We have to also make sure the language is clear when we talk about these things, whether we're talking to the family if you are a professional, or if you are a parent, I'm talking to your child. Like mine, she has autism, so the language is kind of a little bit delayed, so we have to break it down. What does it mean? Like I said earlier, we're breaking down goal. Goal, she knows, she can spell, she can say it, but does she understand the dynamic of a goal? Does she understand, did I achieve my goal or not? So we started simple by dribbling a ball and putting it in a basket. And I said, when you put the ball in the basket, that's a goal. You did a goal. You hit it. And we started like basketball. And basketball is one of the things that she likes. So we started like something that is tangible, that she can understand, that's touchable. For fixing a meal, okay, she likes one particular vegetable. When she boil it and she poke it with the knife, oh, it's done. So you reach your goal of cooking. So we start very basic conversation, but it's working slowly. Always interpret and explain assessment results. And this is from my perspective as a parent. Make sure you understand the results and what does it mean. Because if you are doing a career interest inventory and you have that bunch of paperwork in front of you, and we all know paperwork can be overwhelming, translate it to what does it mean? What will it look like in the future for my child? The district have to obtain a parental, of course, consent in order for them, to complete the assessment. It's just like any evaluation. Assessment for transition, it is equal to evaluation. So if you don't give consent, of course, the school district may not be able, to proceed with this assessment. So keep in mind that sometimes we hear, oh, assessment or evaluation, for what reason? Ask, what is the reason for this assessment? What do you want to pull as an information? Some of the assessment, we get a part of it as a parent. When they gather those data specifically for the social emotional, you will be part of that. For the vocational evaluation, you will be part of that, because they will ask you, is your child volunteering in the community? Did your child have ever, earned by a paid job? And I'm talking about kids who are juniors and seniors and thereafter. So in the conversation for the assessment, make sure you ask your child, who are you? What do you want to do? What is your disability? And that's so important when we start with the disability. And we don't have to tell them that's a bad thing, but we can explain it to them. You just learn differently. These are the things that help you to learn. You have to ask for more time if you cannot, complete that paper, and that is your disability, like a little, something that is hindering you, to complete your assignment, whatever the case may be. Next slide, Paula. Thank you. Our role, it is for life, and that's just a fact. The interest and the talent, the learning style, the personality traits. In the food industry, we have to have friendly people. So we have to watch. Is my child able to kind of give that smile back? Are they able, to grade? Hospitality, it's so important for people to be, friendly, smiley, talkative. Do they have these things if they choose to be, in that field? Social skills, do they understand, the back and forth conversation and that pragmatic language? Do they have any work experience? What are the options after the high school? All of these things that had to be discussed is part of the plan and part of the puzzle to be completed. You have to really start as early as possible and also track the data. And when I say data based on my personal experience, you have to have really, really facts. And the facts, you have to kind of put them in order. Like again, I said, the children can shift their interest based on what they learn, based on the environment, the cultural background, and all of the above. Next slide. So the key factor for developing a successful transition plan is to be realistic. The transition goals are outcome-oriented, should involve quality education. As long as the kid is still in high school, they still are entitled to free appropriate public education. And what does that mean is to receive quality education. The opportunities to interact with peers, which is the social skills, is so important. The social connection and developing social skills is very, very important. I cannot emphasize how important this is. You have to also have the information on all adult options. Among those adult options is basically the Department of Rehab Services and the SSI, the PUNS, which is the Priority Urgency Need for Services. These information should be shared at the IEP meeting by your team. The support services for independence, and we have few resources that we can share with you. Feel free to call us, and we'll be more than happy, to share with you these information. Next slide. Other things to consider. Summary of performance. So the summary of performance, you will receive it at the end of the graduation or when your child graduates. For those who have their children going to 18, you will receive it when they are senior and when they become 18. For those like myself who have the child, planning on having her in the school system until one day before she turned 22, we will receive the summary of performance at that age. So what is the summary of performance? The summary of performance is a paperwork that is handed to us that shows that when they end their high school with a regular diploma or reaching the maximum eligibility to the school district may provide us with this that has all the information: academic achievement, functional performance. When I say academic achievement, the successes, all those grades, all of those, records that they give us about our children, academic successes, and functional performance like the work skills, the accommodation, social skills, self-determination skills, include recommendation on how to assist the student in meeting after high school. The summary performance is prepared and provided to the student during the final year of high school, and it is also including input from the student and the family. You are part of that process of the summary performance. And it's for the student and the family to resume to use it as a resume, because it has a lot of information. There is a link in our resources that will lead you to the summary of performance. I think it is about 7 or 9 pages deep. It has a lot of information. It's a huge curriculum vitae of the students. It is a portable, user-friendly document that provides a summary of the student's academic achievements, functional performance, as well as recommendations regarding the accommodation and the services after high school. Therefore, the school district would keep a copy but has no responsibility to share the document with the outside agency. What does that mean? It is our job to share the summary performance with other agencies who are involved in our children's services. So that is the summary performance. When our children reaches 18, they are legally adults. So we have to have arrangements. For those who have children who can, make decisions, I don't think they will talk about guardianship. But at least at the age of 18, you have to talk about delegation of rights. And this delegation of rights is available to you in our resource page that is coming and also in this presentation. It is a document that the student give their rights to the parent to make education decisions. It's very tricky. I have heard many conversations about delegation of rights. It is based on the family and their dynamic internally. There are kids who can make the decision. You have to really make them buy into the delegation of rights, so they would not make, a decision without you being involved. And there are kids like mine, she will not have a problem to give us her rights in making decisions for her on at least on educational level. Next slide, Paula. So these are the key federal legislation. So we all know IDEA will cover our students when they are in school up to the age of 22, one day before they turn 22. And all of these are the things that cover the school responsibility, services versus accommodation, and the education in the least restrictive environment, quality, and free appropriate public education, and all of what come with IDEA. After they exit IDEA, the school and IDEA, then 504, which is a section of the Rehab Act of 1973. So this have individual responsibility. What does that mean? That the person had to say, I am a person with a disability. I need this to help me access. So 504 and ADA are for access. 504, it is geared towards public institution for cost of assistance or provision of services. It is focused on services and support for a person who are willing to say, I am a person with a disability. 504 focus on non-discrimination on disability. If that person have a disability, they cannot discriminate against their disability. Let's say he has a migraine and he's working in the field of technology. So they cannot be exposed intensively to light. So they have to accommodate by 504 by putting something on the screen that may not give that person with disability those headaches. All of this come with the 504. Then we have the American with Disability Act, and that is what we have as adults if we have a disability. It is individual responsibility, meaning that the person has to admit that they have a disability. It is for institution employment and for public places. It focuses on accommodation versus services and support. It is also focusing on non-discriminating and undue hardship on a person with a disability. There is no link between the federal funding and the compliance with this law. And you can look up these individually, but IDEA cease and end once they exit the high school. Next slide, Paula. So remember, entitle cease and ends once our children leave the school. Then we are talking about eligible. Eligible is a list, and it's a bunch of questions that people need to answer for them to access that service. Eligibility criteria are different than entitlement criteria. Entitlement criteria is that disability must adversely impact their learning to receive special education. Eligibility criteria is totally different. In the real world, the disability is impacting their learning, but they may not be eligible for that service. And you have to ask key questions when you go to those public agencies to seek services for your child. There is a big difference between entitlement and and eligibility to all the services that the child gets in the school and the services that may be eligible when they leave school. So the responsibility falls on us, and we have to be informed, educated on how to navigate the real world or adult services. And with that, I am ending my presentation. I am open to questions now. Thank you for your attention.
At this time, are there any questions? You can type them into the question box, or you can raise your hand in the attendees box. Okay, Judy Sullivan, could you ask your question? Judy, I'm not hearing you. Okay, I believe in our question box we have a couple of questions, so one moment.
If I can jump in, Paula. Judy
Sure.
is asking, will the slide and audio will be available? Yes.
Yes, yes,
the
it will.
webinar, yeah, the webinar is recorded, and you can access the information from our website, frcd.org.
And
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I also have a question at what age should SSI and DRS be introduced in the IEP meeting?
Okay, SSI, it should be, introduced as early as possible, but it involves income for those who are under 18. Once the student reach 18, you have to have a conversation about SSI. You go to your nearest office and you discuss with them with the matter. And again, for SSI, there is an eligibility criteria for them to receive that income. The Department of Rehab Services, my personal and professional experience, you have to start as early as freshmen to involve the Department of Rehab Services in the IEP meeting. SSI in the IEP meeting is only information, only information. I am very clear. The Department of Rehab Services in the IEP meeting, it is direct services if your child needs it. You have to do a paperwork, they call it the DRS refer. You start it from your high school. Case manager has to give you that paperwork depending on where you are. You have to complete it, you have to submit it, and make sure you have copies. And also inquire what are the services that the Department of Rehab Services can provide. Among those things are job shadowing, job coaching. They also have transportation coaching. They have an array of services that they can provide, but you have to ask those questions. And again, you have to start as early as freshmen.
Does that answer your question, Liz? Okay. And we have another question from Judy Sullivan Murray. Could you please talk about the high school diploma versus certificate of completion? If you give a little more detail about that.
Sure, I will be more than happy to do that. It is a great question, by the way, and I'm so sorry. I had covered it lightly during the presentation. So the high school diploma, it is provided for those who are going to complete the high school at the age of 18. Then they will give them the high school diploma. Now, the requirement of high school diploma, they have to have all of the credits, and we all know what are the requirements for the credits. So make sure the course of study that you pick for your child, if you are a parent, it will be credit classes if you have the intention of high school diploma. The certificate of completion is when they are done at the age of 22. Then they give them a certificate of completion. Okay? For the high school diploma, those who are going to go after 18, your student or your child can walk for that graduation ceremony as everybody else, but they will not receive the diploma. Once you receive the diploma, it's not easy to reverse that outcome. You're done. Free appropriate public education is done. Be very careful when you have that last IEP meeting at the senior year. Make sure that the credit requirement is met. Make sure that most important thing is to involve your son or your daughter, if you are a parent or your student, that they are equipped and ready for the real world. And that's so important. Do they understand the ins and outs of college if they go into college? Do they understand the in and out of vocational training? All of that. You can get a high school diploma even though you know your child may not have all the skills. But it's so important to have those conversations. And I'm seeing Judy's other question, the pros and cons of the certificate of completion. Is that what you mean? The EA is finding a job.
Diploma versus certificate will it have any impact if the employer says high school diploma if they have a certificate? Does that count them out? So I'm thinking, okay.
No, it should not count them out. Certificate of completion, it is equal to high school diploma. As a matter of fact, there is a jargon that is used at the age of 18. If your son or daughter is 18 and they have the 4-year of transition, they call it banking the high school diploma. And in that conversation or that jargon, you have to make sure that the certificate of completion will reflect that your child had completed the high school diploma, the 4 first years, and then they are going to transition. It should not count them for getting that job, period. What counts them out, if they count them out, that's an issue with ADA. Did I answer your question, Judy?
We'll give her a moment.
Sure.
You did answer the question.
Great.
Are there any additional questions before we close out today's webinar? And I'm checking the attendees. I'm not seeing anything new. So we're going to go on ahead and close out today's webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thank you.